Alrighty, this year we have invited Sam and Blaine Spees from Nashville, North Carolina. They're a powerhouse glass couple working in a number of different glass processes. This week our students have had the opportunity to be a helping hand in the creation of a wide variety of glass forms, from manipulating hot sand castings to coil building bits in the hot shop. It's been so inspirational to see how Sam and Blaine work together as a team. Watching them go from traditional goblet forms to non-traditional ways of working with glass, like lip trimming color applications. We have learned so many techniques and possibilities to work with this material. They really have made us feel comfortable and welcoming, working alongside them, and very open to all the questions that we have. I can't thank Sam and Blaine enough for the awesome week that they have given our students. Let's do the same and give a warm welcome to Sam and Blaine Spees.
Oh, thanks. Thanks, Gail. Okay, cool. Sweet. Sweet. Hey, guys.
Hi.
Hey, I'm Sam. This is Blaine. Maybe
Hello.
Yeah, first, thanks for having us out here. This has been a really fun week for us. Copper. Thanks, Eli. We've been so busy. We've had a lot of changes in our life in the last couple years, especially with how we work in our business. Okay.
You can let him
Copper being one of them, our dog that
Yes. Thank
he's
you
very
all.
anxious.
Come on, man.
I guess he just wants to be around us.
Sit. Down.
Okay, well, we'll figure
Down.
this out.
Sit.
So we're just going to kind of talk a little bit about like each of our lives and processes, how we got into glass, and then when we met each other and kind of how we've developed our work together. And Blaine asked me to start, so I will start first. We got married this year, and that kind of, we thought this would be a good place to start. We've learned a lot in the last four or so years being together, working together, and we're excited to see the direction that we keep moving with it. I graduated from Center College in Danville, Kentucky. I played sports my whole life, football until I graduated, and it played a big role in how I view glass, art, and just relationships and people. My professor there on the right, Stephen Powell, who actually taught Patrick Martin as well, who was one of the early instructors here before Cale took over. And in my undergrad, I was naturally really intrigued in the blowing process and the technique and the challenge of making, traditional Venetian Italian shapes. Steve was really, really close with Lino Pietra, and he came to Center a couple times as I was there and was really fortunate to be able to help and watch the teamwork and the aspect of him blowing glass, which kind of led down the road of that style of working. And I've always been really interested in lighting as well, so a lot of the work from my senior show was goblet shapes and different overlaying of colors and how I can get bit work and light to kind of interact with each other. Really fun, not really knowing what I was doing, but having an idea of color theory and of some of the possibilities of glass and how I'm learning to control it. From there, I went to Norfolk, Virginia, and they have a really cool assistantship program. And it was an unpaid internship that I did for about a year, which really taught me a lot about life in general, working at a couple restaurants on top of trying to be in the shop as much as I could, networking with numerous visiting artists and my little cohort of people. It was a lot of fun. And we all kind of built towards a project at the end of the year. So we were kind of tasked with walking around the museum and trying to be inspired by some pieces and push to make a full sculpture and not just a vessel of sorts. So it really put me outside of my own comfort zone. This piece here was kind of my venture into exploring my own body with the Veronese shape, which has become a staple in a lot of the stuff that we make, the Emporia shape. Very traditional shape, a lot in ceramics too, especially with some really famous pots. But the glass form of it was painted first in a painting by an artist, Paolo Veronese, which is where that term came from. And the maestros in Italy figured out, how to make that shape from the painting of it. And I think it's really representative of your body. You know, it has a neck and a lip, shoulder, goes all the way down to your waist, and then a foot. So I basically repurposed this with ways and how my body had been, how I've used my body, especially playing sports and the physicality of wear and tear in certain areas. So this was a really good challenge for me as an artist to really think about what pursuits and what direction I wanted to go in. And then my next project was totally the opposite. I went back to lighting and have been very into cartoons, and I was trying to figure out a way to make some unique, fun cartoon shapes that were very specific to emotions. And how we see color, and what emotions those colors have, and when you see a certain thing, what it makes you think of, a stop sign or a yellow light, or the blue sky, the water. So this was a fun thing for me, especially as somebody that's always been really interested in cartoons, and it's kind of a unique way to translate the world and the life that we exist in. And still kept with some lighting, some different ways. Was kind of exploring some colors and shapes and techniques, adding clear to certain areas, switching the axis. So getting a little bit more comfortable with the process of blowing, but also exploring those kind of things that have always piqued my interest in lighting and color theory. This is a pretty funny picture. I've spent 2 months at Penland, probably 2 of the best months that I'll never forget that. I TA'd for the guy in the center there, D.H. McNabb, who has instilled a lot of my blowing practice. It was kind of a tough love experience working with him, but it really made me a much better glass blower. And also questioning certain things that I was making, refining some shapes, reasons why I was doing certain things, and the mechanics behind, if I touch this here, what's going to happen 5 heats from that. There was a lot of knowledge gained in just those 2 months. Making a variety of things, new techniques with the Encolmo and certain things, trying to refine some of these processes while having somebody, at that time I was 23, 24, and it was a really, maybe even younger, but it was a really period of growth for me with the material, and kind of going back to some of that other sculptural stuff as well was always something that I'm inclined to do and hope to keep pursuing in the future. I took a class in Pittsburgh actually with the sculptor Danny White, and the whole week of the class was, okay, we're all going to learn and make some parts, but we're going to put it all together at the end. So what are you going to put together? What's your piece? And made a Lego version of my grandma with a Tootsie Pop. And then this is about the time that I actually moved to Pittsburgh for the first time. and met Will and Kristen here, and Zach actually. Zach and I were in the apprenticeship together, and I was one of Will's first hires when he took over managing the studio there. Never regretted it.
Not even a little bit.
But that time was awesome because we learned a lot of mechanics in the shop. You know, we learned a lot of how to operate a studio. We were helping run the shop, you know, and we took a lot of responsibility and a lot of pride in it. A perk of it was also we got to blow glass. So, I mean, that was probably, that whole year I was probably in the shop more than I ever had been in my life, you know, from 10 p.m. to 2 a.m. almost every night blowing glass. And just making stuff, drawing shapes, making shapes, you know, using scrap color, just trying to get better at the process to broaden my toolbox, you know, in any craft that you know, do, the more you know about the material, you know, the more you'll be able to explore techniques, and the more you'll be able to pursue ideas, right? You're not going to be limited because you don't know this thing or know how this is going to move. So I spent a lot of time trying to get better. And then from there, I actually went back down to Penlands, and I was fortunate to work for a couple there, Nate and Antonia Cotterman, for about 3 years. And that was probably where my hands got the best. I spent almost every day assisting Nate in the shop and got time to blow glass myself, but I was doing mostly the assisting part, which is just as important as the gaffing role. So I learned numerous techniques, and I learned how to be the best assistant I could be, which I take a lot of pride in. And through that, some wedding stuff, like it fun to challenge myself and make some objects for friends. And then from that experience was when I actually developed my first product line that I felt comfortable trying to put out in the world. Some of the students might recognize these bits from that big bit piece that we did. It stemmed from, you know, a functional object that has a thumbprint, essentially, and they're all unique, they're all different, but it also acts as a lens, which I thought was kind of a nice duality, right? Like something that's also, something that's functional, but also there's some concept behind it, and it's aesthetically pleasing too, right? Where's that balance between craft, art, and design? Things that I didn't really realize I was exploring throughout a lot of this time. Until having started to make them and draw and design the products. And then, you know, kind of coming up with some more complex patterning in cane, where, you know, I take the cane and twist it and then put it into two separate pieces, and then I actually fold the lips on them and then colmo them back together. So there's a lot of technical detail that goes into some of these pieces, and the effect is kind of the moire effect. I think that's how you pronounce it, the moire, where you see the overlapping lines with the space between them, and it kind of creates that like hazy look. I was trying to accomplish that right next to the lines that are actually overlapping. So just in something as simple as this, there's a lot of detail. And then from the cane, more exploring some of those patternings. How can I make, you know, something complex, very simple, and also accessible, because, you know, half of making the work is trying to sell it, right? And I think that that's something that needs to be talked about more, because as a practicing artist, both of us, that's our full-time job. We live off of the things we make and sell. So having some practicality to certain things, and trying to market them correctly, you know, these are a fun, smaller thing that have done pretty decent for us, fortunately. And then from that, kind of diving into more sculptural and some of these trimming pieces is what I call them, kind of a perception series, which working with Blaine, as you'll see here in a second, this type of work has really expanded into a lot of different things. So these actually all came from a class that Will and I took when I was back still working in Pittsburgh. And I collected all the trimmings. The whole class was about white glass, so we did a lot of different experimenting with white glass. And I kept them all and then, fused them together and rolled them up and then made a big cylinder. And then from that cylinder, cut it and then slumped it flat back into sheet glass. So the process was kind of a lot. Blaine helped me finish this piece with a mirroring process on the back side of it, which I had never done before. And again, that's going to kind of start, you're going to start seeing some of that collaborative nature. And this was the same thing. This was a bunch of white glass from that same class, making a little bit more of a complex shape, trying to figure out how I can make a nice vessel patterning for these collection of essentially glass that was going to be thrown away. They kind of turned into these watercolor paintings. And trying to figure out what kind of shape, how I can display that, right? It's a little bit less about, it's all process-based, and how can I display this painting that I've kind of created with the material in different ways. So sculpting, certain ways, we're gonna try a couple different things like this tomorrow too, but kind of making a frame for each of the pieces. And like the depth that goes with them, there's a memory behind each one of these where the glass has been pinched and pulled and cut, and that color density holds it. That's a really big part of the process. Like I was saying earlier, you touch this thing here, and then 5 heats later, it reminds you that you touched it there, right? These are a kind of living entity of that, right? Because everywhere it's been pinched, that color stays and changes, and it, I don't know, it's really unique. And from the process of doing these, they kind of turned into these, like I said, paintings, but more landscape-like paintings. We're on the road all the time, and where we live too, it's, I don't know, you look around and you see the sky, you see the mountains, you see the trees, and it's very, I feel like it's very easy to take the inspiration from that. So it's kind of been a unique duality of work. And now I'll hand it over to Blaine, and she'll kind of talk through her artistic practice.
Trajan.
Oh, yep, I got covered.
And yeah, this is about the time that Sam and I met each other and started working. So this photo is actually from our first collaborative demo at Tulane University, where I went to grad school. And this is some of my introductory work that I was doing in undergrad. Glass for me has always been more about a vehicle to making sculpture. You start out in glass blowing like everybody, and pretty quickly I realized I was much more interested in kind of pushing glass to see what it could do versus what the end product was. And was lucky enough to learn from a pretty talented sculptor who kind of saw what I was doing and put me rather than have me go on to intermediate and learn more glass blowing processes, put me into the advanced casting class. And from there, I really took a liking to hot casting. And in this piece, for example, I'm using a lot of inclusions and powders and copper rings to kind of create these landscapes. Which I then pulled together with metal, which I always joke that metal is my mistress. I don't know if I had found that one first, what I'd be doing right now. But glass always for me was about kind of seeing how it can come together into a larger sculpture than just what the actual glass object was. And when I talk about my work, I always talk about the origin of me. So I moved around a lot. My mom was an Army brat and was born and raised in Germany. So I think that when you move to a different country when you're 14, the idea of just moving in general isn't so daunting as it is to a lot of people that grew up in the same place. So my mom and I moved probably every other year. And growing up like that, I sometimes would struggle to think about like home and what home means to you and the friends that you keep with you from elementary or middle school when I couldn't even remember the names of people that I would go to school with from that age. And so location-based work became a really big part of my practice. The original coyote skull from this I found on my grandfather's property in Arizona, where I spent a lot of time. And it really drew me into waxworking as well, and the ability to take these objects and put them together in bigger sculptures and kind of make an object larger than it was in life, especially these forgotten objects like bones and rocks are a recurring theme in my work. And in the vein of just do everything that you can while you're in school because you have the facilities and you have the stuff and you have the time, which we learn is becoming increasingly less likely to have. So I started carving a lot too. I would start with foam blanks that I would carve into a form, and then after casting them, I would go in with a wet angle grinder and continue to refine the form and polish them. And this for me was a really big thing because I am a shy person, not maybe the most graceful in cadence or action. So finding this way of working where my hands, I always say, kind of are doing thinking, and if I make a curve down here, my hands go, okay, well then up here something should happen. And it was this way of working that I found for myself that really felt like a conversation in the time that you spend working, which I thought was a really special thing, and definitely has continued on in my practice as maybe my favorite way of working. I also had a brief stint in public art before I realized that it's really hard to make money in. But again, taking these glass components that I was doing and figuring out how to make them bigger than they are as just the object that you create in the hot shop. Like, okay, so I've made a bunch of these panels, now what do I do with them? And yeah, that love for metalworking came in handy as well. One of them is on permanent display in Charleston, South Carolina, and the other is in the town that I went to college in, Salisbury, Maryland. And as I continued to kind of refine my voice and the type of sculptures that I like to do, I'm continuing to work with these bones that I find. These bones actually came from Kristen here. It was during COVID, and knowing that I like bones, she started sending me like geo tags of bones she would find on hikes. It was like geocaching bones. And that just made it kind of special for me. I got pulled over, I had a dead deer in the back of my car, it was crazy. And they're fun blanks for me because, okay, you cast a bone, you know what it's going to do. So how do I continue to add to it? Like here I crushed up some graphite into powder, and I kind of mixed that into the cracks, and then I silver leafed over that, and then I kind of graphited over that again before sealing it all, and just adding that layering of like texture. And I sometimes joke, like, how do I make it look less like glass? But I love glass as a material of contradiction. People always have this assumption that glass is incredibly fragile. Ooh, that was hard to say. Which often it is, but there's not just one way to do it. When you cast glass, it's very strong. Glass is bulletproof when you make it thick enough. And so I like playing with those ideas, especially working with a material that's perceived as exceptionally fragile and you work in a male-dominated field, and some of the conversations that you have with people are shocking. And so I just really like this kind of mirroring that I've always felt like glass had. And then I went to grad school. In grad school, it was COVID, it was an odd time. But I was very fortunate to go to a place like Tulane where it was kind of a drive your own boat scenario. So I really took advantage of having that shop again and doing everything I could. This piece took 3 full furnaces of glass, which is the kind of thing that you can really only do in grad school.
It's literally like this big.
It is.
It's huge.
Yeah. It's probably never going to leave Louisville where it currently is, and that's great. I love that for it. But it was really some of the smaller maquettes that I would make, like in the bench, little solid sculptures. It was awesome to be able to bring one of them to the scale that I personally like to work in, And thinking about sculptors that I like, who I draw inspiration from, Henry Moore is a big one. And just that use of negative space and kind of seeing through the sculpture to the other side. And especially with glass, another reason for using that material, like as glass gets thin to thick, like what does that do with density and the way that light plays with the material? See, these are all things that I'm thinking about as I was working. And obviously this was sandcast. And I did a lot of hot casting into wood too. That was kind of Gene Koss's, my professor in grad school. His big thing, he loved for students to carve wood molds. And I was like, well, that feels like that would take a lot of time. So instead I built a little like sled out of 2x4s and cast into that. And while it was still hot, picked it up and slumped it over a piece of pipe. And I really like this way of working with glass in that medium time when it's still malleable, but you're never going to get something that big to set up or to reheat. And kind of the manhandling of it, like using my hands, albeit in gloves, to shape this thing that we really only touch with metal tools. And then that kind of led more into one of the bodies of work that I'm still working on, my rivers. So I consider this a very figurative piece of work. And I started thinking a lot about the figure and what does it mean to be a figure. You know, people are kind of lazy. Anytime you see something in the upright, your brain basically starts to look at it in the human form because it's what we're used to looking at. And I was thinking again about all the places I've lived in my life, and maybe the only consistency is that there's always been a body of water where I've lived. And so I was thinking about these bodies of water and rivers and how rivers are always in the same place, but they're also always moving. And I found a lot of self-reflection in that thought. So this was actually a cast of the Mississippi River Basin that I made as I was leaving New Orleans, which was a very bittersweet moment. Sad to leave, but it was because I met Sam, so that was pretty great. But this, again, is about my size. I guess that's the scale that I like working on because it's me. But I felt like I was kind of confronting these feelings on a personal scale because I'm able to look at the thing that I'm making to deal with it. And then, this is not a good photo, but this was another sculpture of the Allegheny River, where it meets the Ohio River and the one that goes through West Virginia, which I never remember how to pronounce. Thank you. And then this is the most recent one that I made. It's at a show that's still up at Third Degree Glass, so if anyone is on a return trip to the East Coast, stop in and see it. And this is the Chesapeake Bay, which I spent most of my childhood in Maryland. So that was a particularly fun one and also one of the more challenging because all of these individual arms had to be held up with an armature. Armature. Thank you. There we go.
Nailed it.
Which goes back to this love that I have of working with metal and kind of bending and manipulating it. And even in some pieces, like you'll see on the right here, like figuring out how it wraps around the glass, and then that just is the sculpture. It is tied into the metal forever now. And that's something that I really like. I think that most materials in general can be made more when you pair them with something else, not just glass specifically. And then this is the other body of work that I've recently started working on. This past summer, my dad passed away very unexpectedly. And when I was going through his things and kind of just emptying out his house, which was the whole thing, I found a couple of boxes of things that he had saved for me. And in one of them was a piece of sea glass that had been turned into a necklace. It was from Newfoundland, Canada, where I spent my summers growing up. It's where my only aunts and uncles and cousins are. And so that was just a really special moment for me. It goes along with those location-based things and the rocks and the things that I keep in my pockets. And so I started kind of creating these sea glass forms wrapped in metal. Again, because art for me is very much a way of working through the things that are happening in your life in the moment. And when I'm not working on my personal work, we're doing this.
You're done?
Yeah, it's your turn again.
Okay. Yeah, so we met, Will and Kristen here introduced us to each other. I don't think they expected it to go this far, but it has. Um, and yeah, we kind of quickly developed a really, really great working relationship, and obviously, personal relationship as well. And, through some trial and tribulations and some, not great working environments, we've kind of bounced around a little bit. We were in Tennessee for a little while, and then as we kind of were realizing what we wanted to do with our lives, what our lives wanted to be together, people we wanted to surround ourselves with, we figured it was now or never if we were going to jump and make this full lifestyle of trying to make our work and sell it and be artists full time. So we did. We kind of hit the ground running and started making work, traveling around, doing almost any show you can think of, whether it would be a tiny block show in downtown Nashville to the sidewalk art show in Chattanooga. And this year we were fortunate to get into a couple pretty big shows, the Baltimore American Craft Show, and we're getting ready to go to the Smithsonian show. So I think what it can show you guys is, we really did. We spent the last 2 years with our heads down, like taking any opportunity that we could, developing work, trying to put it in front of people, and sometimes trying to figure out who those people are, researching areas of the country that have these art shows, that have clientele, and trying to go there and we have 2 of us, and it's really great. Doing it on your own, I feel like, would be a very challenging thing, and it's challenging enough with both of us. But yeah, this is from a demo we did up in River Falls. Well, I guess that wasn't River Falls, that was in Minneapolis. And then a booth shot of our work in February at the Baltimore show. We've kind of, worked to create some products and some things that we sell in a wholesale fashion and also in these retail shows. So each one of these pieces, these bottles we developed, have a band of silver foil in them that we torch and kind of goes a little goldish. We apply the wrap of clear pretty organically to really make each piece one of a kind. So a lot of what this work and how we've developed stuff together has been through this lens of how can we make a really refined object, that references historical things, that shows, the technical prowess and the approach, but also is like a well-designed object and has something unique about it. So each one of these pieces has this unique wrap that will never be the same. We can make the same shape, the same size over and over again, but that is a touch of the handmade to it, which is something that's really important to us. We really want to have that touch of handmade. And these were some vessels that have kind of came from my perception series with the trimming that Blaine has sort of like helped me refine the process on them and creating some different shapes and textures and patterns, things that we were working on with the students all week. That was really fun to try some of these things in that manner. And yeah, again, kind of going back to the landscape and location-based work, it was kind of interesting how our 2 worlds collided in that sense. We have very similar thought processes, but our avenues of getting there are very different. So that blend of how we can kind of create together has been really, it's been really great and challenging for us. And these are probably some of our most popular things that we sell and make now, just in the last 2 years. Same sort of deal with that organic wrap, but Blaine has been putting a lot of copper and other things in her sculptures, and she was like, hey, let's try to put some copper in one of these wraps that you're doing, and it turned into this really unique thing. In the same vein, it's an object that we continue to make over and over and over again, but each one is truly unique, which I think that's a good avenue to pursue when we're trying to sell them, right? Again, talking about that duality, like it's one thing to make the thing. There's things that we make because we need to make them, and there's things that we make because we need to sell them, right? And having that balance for us has been developing some of these products, I think, has been fortunate for us. I think feel like we've been able to make unique objects and have been fortunate that people are buying them, so we're thankful for that too. And kind of sticking true to some of the traditional, Venetian way of working. These were a thing that we got a custom commission for them, and Blaine was like, oh, maybe let's try some new colors. And for me, it was like, yeah, it's really challenging and it's fun to try to make the same thing without a mold over and over again, Powder.
Zero,
Yep.
baby.
And then same with these. These are really fun too, these colored coupe glasses. They've been a really fun design. It's a really fun way to work. It's a solid and a solid pulled stem and a solid squished foot, like a lot of, Czech style and, factory work is made, so it's pretty quick. But they're fun, they're unique, and again, we've been fortunate that people have liked them, and we've pursued the lighting together, and not kind of just we do some of your standard pendant lighting. We have a few different options with those. But the combination of Blaine being, hey, let's try this copper in this thing, and I've been really pushing like how to put the lights together in a little bit more of a sculptural way, not just putting it in a pendant kit, sourcing some hardware, fabricating some of the hardware myself, and figuring how I can get this look hidden, But again, having the accessibility of some of these other things in the same organic way of the wrap. And again, kind of pushing some of the bounds of how do we assemble this thing together, and hiding the light source, really creating unique, one-of-a-kind things. These are really fun because we essentially pull and stretch the flat cane and then wrap it on itself, cut it from the thing, and then we're just free sculpting it. Again, another way that kind of Blaine's influence rubbed off on me and vice versa. And then, yeah, Blaine decided to put that picture at the end. That's me holding my ring finger up, just so you guys know. We are really excited and thankful that we've had the opportunity to be here, to work with the students, to work with some of our really close friends. And yeah, we really can't thank all of you guys enough for having us, and we're really excited to make some fun stuff tomorrow and hopefully make a bunch of money for the art program.
Yeah, thank you all so much.
Yeah. I guess, do we say, are there any questions?
Blaine, for your river pieces, the process, are they sand cast or lost wax?
Those are lost wax. Lost wax casting. Especially this one, the Mississippi, I made while I was at PGC, which was great because they have a bell kiln that could fit me inside of it. So I was able to make some of the most complicated molds I've ever made. But it really just depends on the studio that I have access to, and that dictates the process of how to get to whatever the end result was going to be anyways. Sandcasting is not a popular thing among blowers.
They're all one piece.
No, this one is 3, maybe 4. This is 2, and then I believe the Chesapeake is 5. maybe 6.
This one is like with the stand and stuff. I mean, it's like as tall as I am.
And I like the challenge of figuring out the armature and how to hold it all up. And again, it really is dictated by what's the size of the kiln that I'm going into, what's the biggest mold I can make. In all these curves, like knowing how glass melts, if it's around basically a 90-degree bend, it's very much going to want to break there. So especially when you're divesting the plaster off of it, if I'm probably going to break it, then it's got no chance in transport.
A couple over there.
How do you promote your work, and then do you like have a website to sell stuff off of, or how do you sell it?
We both have individual websites, and then our shared Spees Studios website that links to both of our art websites. But yeah, we do sales off of there, and then the majority of our promotion, I would say, comes from boots on the ground, just the shows that we do, meeting people. We were fortunate in the time that we spent in Nashville to meet a couple of interior designers who have been great to work with, and just relentless reaching back out to people and following up.
Yeah. And then, like she said, we've like now hit a couple areas of the country. We go up to Minnesota for a show or two every year now. We spend a lot of time in the DC, Baltimore area. We have done a couple shows there. Kind of in the middle of the country a little bit too, in Louisville. It's kind of one of those things that was an avenue for us to put ourselves out there, meet people, and try to sell work, right? If we were going to do this, that was a big thing. And through those, we've, as she said, met other folks and retail shops and designers and some people that, fortunately have liked our stuff and wanted to collaborate with us. So that's another avenue. We've started to do quite a bit of wholesale work, which is kind of great. It's a little less traveling. You get half the bang for the buck, but in reality, a lot of them order in bulk. So for us, it does work.
So like with your production work and with the sculptures, I was wondering, like roughly, how many mock-ups would you say you do for, like, I know obviously the rivers had specific rivers in mind, but you said you did mock-ups and stuff. I was wondering how many mock-ups you do, or like how many color tests or product, like R&D goes into a lot of your work.
Well, the rivers all start in foam. It's one of my favorite things to carve. So that's kind of, I'm a terrible sculptor. I should make maquettes. I sketch for a while, and then I just go for it in foam, because for me, it's very much about the process of doing. I can't think through it until I'm doing it. I have a really hard time visualizing things. And then color tests. It is whatever bullseye people are gracious enough to donate to me when I am on the go. I think that the Chesapeake was the first one where I was actually like, I have to buy some. And then I also reached out to a couple of friends.
And like for some of the products, we kind of were collectively like, oh, what do we like? What colors do we like? What colors have we seen be successful? And so we kind of created a grouping of things that were what we kind of liked. The custom stuff, and a lot of it has to deal with what the client wants. So that's probably the thing that we've learned a lot over the last 2 years too, is like working with different people and how we need to approach sending samples, or making sure that like how we communicate to them, they understand what they're getting, right? I think that's just a really tough thing for almost anything in general. But most people that we work with they want a handmade, unique thing, whether it be this lighting sculpture or this casting. So that has a benefit for us too.
Retail shows have been great too, because the colors that people gravitate towards more, that's really good to know. And then kind of putting those towards our wholesale catalog.
Mm-hmm. So I'll hand up back there, yeah.
I was just going to ask if you guys have any processes or routines that kind of help encourage your career as a full-time artist in the process.
yeah, I mean,
We have to drink coffee together in the morning and talk about what we're gonna do that day, or it all goes off the rails.
yes. Yeah, the morning meetup sync up for one of us, me, is really helpful and important. Otherwise, I kind of walk around like a chicken with their head cut off. Because you're like, I don't know, this is the first time that we've been our own bosses, you know, like you work for other people, you do a job. Now we're kind of like, oh, what do we need to do today? And prioritizing things, especially recently when things have gotten really busy for us, which is really great. Now we're learning, okay, how do we slow it down, organize ourselves together, and make plans. You know, Blaine actually just recently started filing with all of our different like clients and, you know, wholesale versus retail, and who were what projects we did for them, so that we can go back and look at certain things like, oh, I'm gonna reach out to so-and-so, like the Shop Blackberry. We haven't talked to them in a while. These were the things that they were looking for us, or they had ordered, type of thing.
Yeah, we have a whole binder system now,
Yeah.
a lot of lists.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be able to talk a little bit about this shift that you made when you made the choice to just jump into the deep end and decide to like go fully and be a full practicing artist, particularly for our students as they're kind of considering to do this for their career? Would you just be able to speak a little bit about that process and like, I mean, was there? I would imagine that there's like fear associated with this kind of
Oh, yeah.
decision. But could you talk a little bit about maybe some of the trials or things that you found were really great solutions?
Yeah. I mean, I think working for people for as long as you need to is a great thing. Sam and I both have taken so much from the people that we've worked for, and I think it's really shaped who we are as makers. And for us, it was honestly a bad job that moved us to a place where we kind of didn't have any other option other than to either completely pivot and do something else with our lives, or just take it into our own hands. So there was a little bit of the determination of, well, we're not gonna go do something else, and we just moved here, so you gotta rebuild the finances before you move again. So there was a little bit of determination in that, and definitely fear. And, you know, I worked at a bar for the first 2 years of us making that shift. And we were on the road all the time, going to the places that we needed to. So I think that what we learned in making the shift is that whatever you drive at and put the time and the hours into is probably going to pan out, because that's what you're putting all of your effort into. But if your effort is very scattered between a lot of things, then it's less likely to be successful.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much spot on. The only thing I would add to it is to reiterate what she said, pretty much. For us, it was kind of a cards dealt hand certain way, and we had to make a choice. And we, like I said, we're both very determined people. And I think that's a big part of why we ended up together and why we've pursued this in the manner that we have. We both want to be the best at the things we do too. Like, we don't want to do a bad job. So like, when you're your own critic and you don't want to screw up, like, you're gonna find every way you can to make it work, right? Or to be successful. So I guess that's probably the other thing, is challenging yourself to know that you can do it. Because like, you can do it, everybody can do it, you know? Me and another buddy of ours, we talk about that all the time. Like if you're gonna do it, right? Like, there's no looking back. There's no like right or wrong way. Like, we're learning on the fly, and we are faking it till we're making it, I guess, right? Like, that's a real thing. And I think that staying positive too, like, especially in the moments that are really tough, because it's really easy to get down and be like, oh, nothing's working, but like, if you just like look at, oh, like we just got this job, or that you networking and talking to that person about this thing, like 5 months later, finally panned out. So now we're like, oh, sweet, that's like, 3 months of rent right there, kind of thing, which is a weird way to look at it, but it's reality. And we get to do what we love to do with each other and our friends. I think that's the other thing, right? Like if you love what you do, like you're gonna figure out a way to do it, right?
And even if that is having another job on the side for a while, there is no shame in that.
Yep, 100%. We've
Always done it.
We've always done it until just recently, when we've been fortunate to get ourselves to a point. And that was kind of the light at the end of the tunnel.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, wow, okay, some of these things panned out and we have these things, and then we're kind of constantly looking towards the next thing, but also trying to stay in the moment too. That's another thing I would say is important. Like you want to look ahead, you want to learn from the past, but you want to live in the moment. So balancing those three things and figuring out how that works for you and your partner is, that would be the last thing I'd say about it.
To support the ESU Art Forum program, please visit emporia.edu/art. Click on the Events tab, scroll down to the Art Forum link and click. Then scroll down to the Support Art Forum button and click. Finally, choose your donation level and click on the Continue button to complete the process. We appreciate your support.